Not an awful lot of notice, is it?
No. So I was to go back, pack all the limited goods that we had, take into camp. We were limited to 2 or 3 suitcases per family to take to camp. So we didn't have that much to take.
So things like your cars were left behind,
Oh,
your
yeah.
furniture was left
That's right.
behind.
Oh, no, we couldn't take any of the heavy stuff.
Everything just got left. And what happened
Well,
to that in your
no,
family?
we were fortunate in that we advertised a rental, and a couple came in, indicated interest, rented the house, and amazingly enough, lived during the war in the house. And when we were permitted to return, they moved out.
You had your house back.
Hmm?
You had your house back.
Yeah.
That's certainly better than a lot of people had in Vancouver here.
Oh, in Canada, the situation was totally different. That in the sense that people were ordered to move. We were carried by military or their hirees. And we were told to assemble at particular places initially. In Seattle, I remember being asked, our area was asked to go to right next to public fairgrounds.
I need to take a break for a second here. I've got a cough.
Okay.
Well, we're back, and I can sort of talk again. I've got a laryngitis, bad voice, cough. We're talking to Kenji Okuda. And if you happen to have got one of our emails talking about what this is all about, and you want to talk to Kenji because you've got a story of your own, the number to call is 1-866-980-0499. That's if you're watching it Wednesday, April the 15th, between 6 and 7 p.m. Got to tell you, we're actually having Bill Vandezam come here 2 weeks from now. He's going to take your place 2 weeks from now. And the fellow that was here last week, we were going to have you here then, David Hancock, is on Discovery Channel sometime tonight talking about his Eagles. So we're going to have some fun here. We're going to run through a few ex-premiers and a few ex-incarcerees and so on. It's sort of fun because the reason that I was born in British Columbia, and I told you this, and I'm not sure if you remember it, is that my father spoke Japanese, and he was brought back from Europe when Pearl Harbor took place, and was in charge of the base up at Vernon, BC, and that's what he did. He was moving the Japanese off the course, off the coast. And I know you haven't been there because I asked you, but for anybody else, if you ever get a chance to go through the internment camp, the resurrected historical camp up at New Denver.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about it.
It is, I'm getting little shivers just thinking about it, because as you walk through it, you can see the camps that they built, just like you're talking about it. And that's what it is. It's an internment camp. And tiny rooms and tiny spaces, but also neat and tidy. And letters from the period. And I can still remember one man talked about how he'd been taken away and had to leave his Buick and his Packard behind, and they'd given him $35 for his Buick and $25 for his Packard, or vice versa, something like that. Left all their stuff, and it's beyond belief. And in '64, I took a ride with my father, who it turned out wasn't my father, but that's a whole other story. We took a ride from Vancouver to Regina, and we drove up through the Kootenays. We stopped at places like Tabor, Alberta, and we would remember '64 is what, 19 years after the end of the war. This sounds like it's 40 years ago, but it's only 19 years after the end of the war. We'd stop in a little town, and at a garage usually, or a little store, and a Japanese fellow would come out of the store always with a garage, and Arnie, how are you, etc. And they'd bow to each other and say something in Japanese type of thing. And I found out that my dad had kept on with a whole bunch of these people after the war and during the war, helping them establish businesses and so on. So I have a personal interest in this, because he was one of the bad guys that moved the people away from the coast, but he also seemed to try to keep on. And I think the stories that I hear in Canada, I think were sometimes a little harder on people than yours. So keep on. You were given 3 hours or notice or something to get on a train to San Francisco.
Right. And so I was given special treatment, and my impression is, or at least from what I heard and learned later, that the reason I was considered a subversive or potential subversive is that I had invited the Dean of Business at the University of Washington to visit us in the first camp, temporary
yes,
camp,
the Pearl.
to talk. And his talk was America at War. And he was talking about the trip he had just taken, traveling around the U.S. a couple of weeks after war had broken out. So he was explaining what he saw and was really informing us that the war was affecting the rest of the U.S. as well as where the military had acted against us. So, any case, we were transferred first into the temporary camp, and then I was given this special treatment. My family, my mother, my father had been taken, but my mother and my sister and brother, I guess, don't quite remember who the family members were. And so we were put on a train along with one other family and accompanied by one very heavy guard who just simply snoozed all the way.
He slept the whole way, did he?
And I got off in Northern California. I don't remember the town. The other fellow was a very active lawyer in Seattle at the time. Went on down to another town. Then we were taken to another camp, temporary camp, a fairground camp for the Japanese, and then joined the group that was being transferred to the more permanent facilities in Colorado.
Okay, but you were separated from the group that you knew.
Oh yeah,
my family, with a bunch of other people.
City, the town, and all my friends and so on. They had been sent to Idaho, so I ended up in Colorado. But in order to get there was interesting by train, because we were on of course, non-military train and ordinary train, and so all the blinds were closed, and we would have to be moved over to a siding anytime a military train went speeding through.
Or supplies or something. Now, were you scared at this time? I mean, you were 20 years old.
No.
Did it bother you? Were other people scared?
No.
Was it just something that was going on?
There was something going on there. I felt no particular sense of loss or anything, or fear. And I was...
What about outrage?
Not outrage.
No.
We're just being subject to war. I was at least outspoken, able to speak, so it was not surprising that the spokesman would have to be, for the most part, one who could speak English well, which meant it would be from the young children of the immigrants.
Well, you were Nisei.
That's right, Nisei, second generation.
Second generation.
As we were identified, Nisei. And the Nisei were all the oldest were in their 20s, because the Oriental Exclusion Act et al. Meant that Japanese immigrants could not enter U.S. and Canada, for that matter, until sometime in the 1920s.
No, Canada, there was no vote until 1948.
I know, but at least they could not come in as immigrants once war broke out. Same with the U.S. And that cutoff was for a period, during the war period, but some other countries, Canada, for example, did not permit them, Japanese, to come until several years after the war ended.
And I needed